1 year ago, on the 8th of August 2025, Azerbaijani and Armenian leaders met in Washington, D.C., where, in the presence of President Donald Trump, they initialed the text of the long-awaited peace agreement, agreed to establish the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, and jointly appealed to the OSCE to bring the Minsk process to a formal conclusion. The Minsk group was subsequently closed on the 1st of September, with the remaining administrative procedures completed in November. The significance of that day continues to shape our current reality. Limited economic interaction between Azerbaijan and Armenia has begun, the regional connectivity agenda has acquired new momentum, and for Armenia in particular, the emerging peace has coincided with a profound redefinition of its wider geopolitical orientation. Joining me now to discuss all of these matters are Arek Kochinyan, President of the Armenian Council, based in Yerevan, and Mohammad Mammadov, Research Fellow at the Topchubashov Center, based in Baku. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen.
Greetings.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Arek, first of all, let us reflect on the importance of 8th of August. I remember interviewing you and other colleagues during that time period. After Abu Dhabi, there were certain expectations. When I was interviewing Vasyl Huseynov here live, we heard the information that peace treaty could be initialed. But many analysts at the time were expecting something along the lines of memorandum of understanding, nothing legally binding, but nothing as consequential as what happened on the 8th of August. Were you anticipating the gravity and magnitude of what happened on the 8th of August in advance?
Well, to be honest, I don't remember was I anticipating or not, but that doesn't matter in my opinion. What matters is the fact that it's been a year by now, the first year in my memory, where there is no violence on the Armenian-Azerbaijani border. And I think that matters the most. The Washington Memorandum, the ratification of the peace agreement, and the political will that both leaders and both governments has shown at that day and since are working. The fruits of that will is something both the Armenian and Azerbaijani nation can see in their day-to-day life. And I think this is the most important thing, and this is what matters.
Thank you, Arek. Mohammed, I mean, if to be absolutely honest, of course, naturally, we were anticipating something quite important before 8th of August. We know that year 2024 was a peaceful year. There was, with the exception of one particular episode, I think, if memory serves me correctly, in February or March of 2024, everything was very peaceful. And that was the year when everybody was talking about de facto peace. And then 2025, year of 8th of August joint declaration. How transformative you think that moment has proven to be in the context of not just Azerbaijan-Armenia relations, but also in the context of wider destiny of South Caucasus and beyond?
Yeah, I think both bilaterally and regionally, there was a very quite wide, large, permissive environment to bring that result to the agenda, because both after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we had more, let's say, geopolitical vacuum Azerbaijan and Armenia had to go bilateral, which I think proved quite consequential and results were quite positive. And I think August 8 declaration in that regard was a logical culmination point of 2 years bilateral, let's say, talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And again, it was both bilateral achievement, and I think it gave both countries to move in different directions in their foreign policy more independently. That I think Arek also mentioned this, but another interesting point is that last 1 year, Armenia and Azerbaijan have not been the main discussion points in their foreign policy priorities. Yeah, Armenia has been prioritizing in relations with the EU, some tensions with relations in Russia, and Azerbaijan has been more focused on pivot to Central Asia and preventing the negative repercussions of the war in Israel and between Israel, Iran, and the United States. So, in that regard, there is this kind of a permissive environment. And the fact that the two countries achieved to anchor this peace process with the support and engagement of some external powers, positive engagement, which was not the case before. Here, I'm talking about the United States. So it also gave some space for both sides to negotiate and focus on bilateral talks, but also have some support and positive engagement from external powers.
Arek, before I ask about the current problems regarding, not problems, but the issues that are to be addressed regarding connectivity, Trump route for international peace and prosperity, about the future of the Armenia's railway system, which is substantially still managed by South Caucasus Railway, which is actually a subsidiary of a Russian railway. I would like to ask about the impact of 8th of August moment on Armenia's current reality. When we look at Armenia's current reality, what we see de facto peace with Azerbaijan. The peace treaty initial, but needs to be signed. We see advancing Turkish-Armenian normalization, where lots of measures are being taken, but still practical measure. Border opening is connected with the Azerbaijan-Armenian peace. So we see EU-Armenia moments. We see tensions with Russia. To what extent do you think it was 8th of August moment that produced the current reality that Armenia is experiencing?
Well, when we're talking about the creation of this reality, we have to give credit to the meeting in Abu Dhabi, because everything that was agreed upon in Washington, except for probably one topic, that being TRIP, was actually agreed in Abu Dhabi on the bilateral scheme, on the bilateral agenda, and that's what matters, I think. Armenia and Azerbaijan did not sign the peace agreement in a, if I may, post-colonial discourse where a civilized white man came and created the peace between two local aborigines. Armenia and Azerbaijan were the ones who led the process. Armenia and Azerbaijan were the ones who, through the Abu Dhabi meeting, made the peace itself possible. Of course, Washington summit helped the sides to overcome the last remaining strong disagreement, which was the connectivity issue. Now coming to your question, I would say that since the Abu Dhabi and Washington meetings, of course, there were some other very significant developments as well. For example, the Brussels summit in which Armenia, United States and European Union for the first time on the level of Prime Minister Ursula von der Leyen and Blinken at the consultations about the support for Armenia and some other events.
Was that in April 2024, Arek? That trilateral meeting, was that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was before Abu Dhabi.
So all of those combined created alternatives for Armenia in its relations with Russia. And I would say this is the biggest change. For decades, Armenia was ready to swallow pretty much everything Russia would ask and would do in exchange for security or an image of security. And throughout 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, this image collapsed and it created a need in Armenia for a pivot. And Washington Summit was one of the very important elements of this pivot. But what I am trying to describe to you is that all of this happened because a political decision was made in Armenia to create alternatives to the current realities of the Armenian-Russian relations. Because we understood at a certain point that this is a road to nowhere. This is a road to non-state solution, let's say.
It's very interesting you said about the British sort of colonial administration coming and addressing the problems of two indigenous groups, and that has not happened between Azerbaijan and Armenia. It was a sort of bilateral process. Process has always been probably bilateral, although the connectivity element is not perhaps purely bilateral. There's a third party there, but still within the confines of sovereignty of a given nation. In this particular case, Armenia. Again, just to make sure my question that I put to Arek coincides in terms of its substance and nature with the question I'm going to put to you, Mohammed. How important is it that these two countries achieved everything bilaterally, not through third-party mediation? We understand the importance of President Donald Trump, Washington summit, but still, had it not been bilateral ab initio, Trump's intervention or Trump's presence would not have worked. Could you just reflect on the importance of bilateral element of the process?
Yeah, bilateral part of that process is important because right now, I mean, especially after the bilateral talks gained substance, the main buzzword, let's say, in the talks have been institutionalization. Yeah, so we have started this peace process. So how we do go from here? Yeah, how we do institutionalize so that there is no, I mean, so the process is not that vulnerable to any, I mean, small changes, both domestically and externally. Since that time, I think, yes, there have been some steps taken in that regard bilaterally, but we are still not there. Mm-hmm. The peace process is not well institutionalized. But I think the proper term here is routinization. Yeah. Besides this, all that balance of power calculations and external pressures and engagement, but I think the main point here is routinization of peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I think both Armenian and Azerbaijani leaders have been using this sentence that we are learning to live in peace. Yeah, I think especially President Aliyev has recently using that phrase frequently, that both Armenia and Azerbaijan have started to learn living in peace. That means the process is being routinized, that so no longer two sides are seeing each other as like in enemy images. Yeah, so it opens a lot of doors to engage. And as you know, we have three separate negotiation tracks, and it creates a spillover effect from, let's say, now probably we'll discuss, TRIP. Any developments in TRIP is pushing, I mean, positive spillover effects on border demarcation and delimitation that, Armenian officials were saying that, okay, maybe we should prioritize the border section from where TRIP would run through. So it all shows the routinization of the bilateral, let's say, perception between Armenia and Azerbaijan in a positive way that really decreases the cost of engagement and opens the way for further institutionalization of bilateral track.
Thank you, Mohammed. I mean, you just use the term routinization. I think that's what you said. Just making this process normal. It's not an extraordinary thing that the two countries are talking to each other and agreeing on things. I mean, I give you one example. It's not about a formal peace process, but actually being able to conduct an interview involving Azerbaijan experts at the very inceptional moment of AnewZ it's a massive challenge. And then when I was beginning the process of doing Caucasus Now, it was a challenge. Now it has become very routinized, if I may refer to your language. And actually your colleague Recep Hüseyinov also is known for his terminological sort of a prowess and the geopolitical equidistancing, I think that the term that he coined and introduced to the political analysis. Arek, let's talk about something which is happening now. Relations between Russia and Armenia are very tense. We understand there are certain elements. But what I want to understand, we hear a lot about Armenia's railway system. Basically, we understand that the system is managed by Russia, effectively. And there's a question between ownership and management. And Russia does not want to lose its effective leverage. And some people, including Farhad Mamadov, once said that it's the Russian control over the Armenian railway system is far more important than a Russian military base based in Gyumri. What is happening there exactly, and how important it is that Armenia is able to achieve its stated purpose?
There can be two explanations of why Russia is doing this trade wars or hybrid war against Armenia. One is what our colleague Farhad Mamedov once or for many times explained. His idea is that Russia is doing this proactively to secure its strategic actives in Armenia. And I don't necessarily disagree with this opinion. I think this is the project minimum that the Russians have. But I do also think that Russians have a program maximum, which is to stop the process that I described to you a bit earlier, and that is creation of alternatives for Armenia. In the Russian optic of South Caucasus, Armenia should not have alternatives in politics, in economy, in military, in security, regardless of the topic, regardless of the issue. There should be no alternatives to the Russian option. This is the Russian agenda towards Armenia, and that is the program maximum. Now, coming to the railroad issue, it is owned by the Armenian government. There is no question about the ownership. It is under Russian concession. The agreement theoretically can be cut it, and in that case, an issue of reimbursement will come to existence. With this topic, there are very different calculations in Yerevan and in Moscow. Based on the calculations in Yerevan, we're talking about a reimbursement smaller than $100 million. Russians are talking about a sum of more than $1 billion. Now, the question, if the sides have a disagreement, what is the solution? The agreement has the answer to this question. If the sides have disagreements, the Paris Court of Arbitrage is the one to decide. So if in the case when Armenia wants to annul the agreement and Armenia and Russia are not able to agree on the sum of the compensation towards the Russia, the Paris Court of Arbitrage will be the one to decide that number. I think we have passed the point of no return, and sooner or later, I hope sooner, the agreement will be annulled and the Russians will lose their concession on the railroad system.
So according to I think Article 17 of that 30-year concession agreement signed back in 2008, unilateral termination is a possibility, but there is a cost, of course. And I also heard different figures. One Armenian analyst talking about $300 million and so forth. But it looks like that if Armenia wants to increase its sense of control over that system, or basically remove Russian management, then a certain amount of money probably needs to be paid. And Prime Minister Pashinyan mentioned about taking this case to arbitration, as far as I understand. One more question, follow-up question for you, Arek. Another aspect here is Armenia's relations, Armenia's membership within collective security treaty organization, and the question of the lack of payment and so forth. What is the Armenian policy there? As I understand, as of probably since the war of 2020, Armenia does not see any value in staying as a member of collective security treaty organization. We understand that border clashes of September 2022 contributed to that. And after basically September 2023, this has been a subject which for many Armenians seems to have been resolved. You don't see any value staying there. Why not to leave then? Why not to leave then?
I think because it's better for them to leave us. I think that's the tactical, let's say, decision made in Yerevan, that Armenia will never make this formal decision to leave CSTO, thus escalating Armenian-Russian relations further, but will create conditions in which CSTO will be the one to decide instead of Armenia, for Armenia to leave that organization. That's pretty much what Uzbekistan did years ago, when it was the collective security, what was the name of the highest body of the CSTO? I
will remember later, I suppose.
Yeah, collective body, let's say, of this organization, the leaders of the organization made the decision and dropped Uzbekistan effectively out of the organization.
Thank you, Arek. I'm going to put my question to Mohammad now, but Arek, you also have a right to respond to that question because it involves Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process and it's a bit sensitive, so to speak. Mohammad, as limited economic interaction between Azerbaijan and Armenia continues to expand since October 2025, when President Aliyev announced in Kazakhstan that Azerbaijan would lift all the restrictions of cargo going to Armenia through Azerbaijani territory, there has been we have seen the benefits of economic cooperation, so they're gradually taking root, even in the absence of formally signed peace treaty. If that were to happen, so Armenia benefiting from peace without formally signed peace treaty, what is the likelihood, from the Azerbaijani analytical point of view, of Armenia getting the benefits of peace without actually signing formal peace deal, which effectively means that Armenia is not in need of removing that element from preamble, which for Azerbaijan is an absolute must. What is the danger of that? I heard many Azerbaijani analysts talking about that over the past few months, and I would like to hear your reflection, and then if Arek is willing to comment, I would be delighted to hear his reflection as well.
Yeah, I Azerbaijani strategy definitely have changed from, let's say, asphyxiating Armenia, let's say, as it did in the last 3 decades, to engaging it in regional, let's say, value and supply chains. And I think the recent openings and the removing of the ban on transit of cargo from Azerbaijani territory en route to Armenia was, I think, a sign of goodwill from the Azerbaijani side that to let's say, in a positive way, push Armenia toward this positive peace agenda. But I don't think that Azerbaijani side is, well interested in that. I mean, in theoretically, we call it relative gains in international relations. Yeah, when the two states, especially the one who lacks mutual trust because of the decades-long conflict, cooperate, they do think about not about absolute gains but relative gains. Yeah, who gains more? So in the case of Azerbaijan, I think the shortest answer, maybe a bit theoretical it sounds, is Azerbaijan is interested in any trade engagement with Armenia where it will gain more. I mean, this is the case with any country, but especially for Baku, who emerged from the war with upper hand. So the main point is that, yes, there will be trade openings, there will be cooperation, there will be institutionalization of peace, but it should not come at the expense of the main Azerbaijani interests in the region. I mean, the stats quo for that of the Second Karabakh War. So in that regard, I remember...
Yeah, please.
Sorry?
Carry on, please.
Yeah. Because I understand politically it sounds attractive. Some European officials coming to, I remember in Yerevan summit, European Political Community Summit, Ursula von der Leyen, European Commission President, said, okay, Armenia and Azerbaijan can learn from the practice of the European Union when after the Second World War, Germany and France forged this coal and steel community. Yeah, it created some kind of a mutual interdependence. Yep. And that led to today where we are. So, Mohammed,
we have very limited time. If you finalize now, I want to make sure Arek has an opportunity.
My point is that yes, there is a very big, very large environment for Azerbaijan and Armenia trade and the gain economically from mutual cooperation, but that environment is not guaranteed by, I mean, in security-wise or. I mean, is not yet integrated into broader regional security system. So in that regard, unfortunately, so far the two countries are thinking in zero-sum terms in trade rather than in...
Thank you. Arek, do you have any comment to make?
Yes, I'll try to be as short as possible. First, we have to recognize that so far everything Armenia and Azerbaijan achieved is yet reversible. It is not irreversible, because we didn't sign the peace agreement yet, etc., etc. At the same time, I think that a decision that was made, if I remember correctly, approximately 2 years ago by Armenia and Azerbaijan, that was to detach certain processes from each other. Peace agreement, delimitation, demarcation, opening of connectivity. 2 more topics have arisen during the last 2 years. Economic interactions and contacts on the level of civil society created a situation in which we have 5 parallel processes in the Armenian-Azerbaijani normalization process. And in reality, when one of them stagnates, the other 4 can move forward and thus do not create a new version of status quo between our countries, but keep it dynamic and keep it forward oriented. This is very important. And I think that despite the fact that sides still have certain disagreements on one of these avenues, let's say, they have to move forward on the others. And the very last comment, I remember the name of the highest council body of the organization. It's Collective Security Council.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for remembering it. Arek Kochanyan, President of the Armenian Council, and Mohammad Mammadov, Research Fellow at the Top Center. I'm very grateful to both of you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, today we discussed the critical and crucial importance of the 8th of August breakthrough. On that day, Azerbaijani and Armenian leaders met in Washington, D.C. in the presence of Donald Trump. They signed a joint declaration, which, amongst many other things, included the provision related to the Trump route for international peace and prosperity. The foreign ministers appealed to OSCE to achieve its disbandment, which actually technically happened in November after the legal endpoint on the 1st of September 2025. And of course, naturally, the text of the long-awaited peace agreement was initial, which is yet to be signed. Well, of course, naturally, a lot has happened, but still, we haven't reached the point of irreversibility, as one of my guests, Arya Kochinyan, president of the Armenian Council, said. Perhaps from this point onwards towards irreversibility, a lot will happen. I will be here to report and analyze about those very pertinent points in the days and weeks and months ahead. You've been watching Context. I'm Orkhan Amashov, and see you very soon indeed.